in terms of the broader sort of people question, the HR question, there is a lot to consider in terms of the employment and deployment of expatriate workers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether they're Westerners or other Arab nationalities or coming from the East, and then all, as I said at the start, a critical component of HR discussions is Saudization and this requirement for the mandatory employment of Saudization. And that has two components to it. One is your compliance with the rules, because if you breach the rules, the penalties are quite strict. But also, how are you going to embrace that from a recruitment and retention perspective? What we tend to talk to our clients about is establishing an HR toolkit effectively. So you have the broadest understanding of how are we going to, so who's going to actually, do we need to send expats to Saudi Arabia, and how do we actually do that? Do we need an entity in the kingdom? Is that going to be our own entity, or are we going to use a partner? And how are we going to help deliver this Saudization challenge of recruiting and retaining Saudis, upskilling Saudis, so that they can become part of your team on the ground in the kingdom? Obviously, a lot of that is driven by business winning activities. You know, if you win one small contract for the supply of equipment, well, you're not going to set up a company in the kingdom and employ 100 Saudis. If you win a 5-year program that requires you to put 20 people on the ground for 5 years, you will absolutely need to have your own entity, and you'll need to look at how you Saudize some of those roles, or you employ Saudis to support those 20 people if they're expats. And that HR toolkit is a great way to start, because that gives you all the options. The challenge that you'll have, Jane, is that you'll get a call from the project director or from the BD team saying, oh, we've won a contract and we need 10 people in Saudi next week. And that's when, if you've got the toolkit ready to go, you can say, no problem. I know we're going to do visit visa, Iqama, we're going to outsource that role, we're going to Saudize that role. But it all starts with the resource plan. You know, those people that work for big prime contractors will know that people love to write plans and all of that. But in this instance, it is actually worthwhile, because getting a resource plan written as early as possible will identify all of these challenges that you might have. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind is that you will not be the first company that is exporting to Saudi Arabia. You're not going to be the first company that's delivering on the ground in the kingdom. So although things may be unknown to you or seem alien and challenging and in some cases illogical, there are people here who can support and advise and guide and really hold your hand throughout that whole process to make it as efficient and as easy as possible.
One piece of advice: if HR is going to try and get people to go to Saudi, I strongly suggest HR goes to Saudi. Go, see it, sit in the hotels, go to the beautiful restaurants that are there in the middle of Riyadh, understand the diplomatic quarter. You know, I've seen so many people stay in their home country trying to persuade people to take Saudi jobs, and they've never been there themselves. Well, that's not, I personally, I think it's just missing a trick. You know, so I mean, if you actually go and see, and as Stuart says, understand the process that you have to go through, in, you know, just a formal process, but then go and actually understand what compound living is like. Go and understand the new housing estates, which aren't compounds. I think everybody thinks in Saudi everything is behind these huge walls. It used to be. It's absolutely not like that anymore. And I think unless you've seen it and touched it and felt it, I don't think you can be as enthusiastic, if you like, to say to some of the staff who may not understand what it is living in the Middle East and in Saudi in particular. So I would encourage, and I know it's expense and it's, you know, airfares and all the rest of it, but I would encourage that the HR team actually goes and spends a week in Riyadh, and you'll get a totally different, or Jeddah or wherever, but you'll get a totally different feel than trying to do it remotely. I assure you of that.
Good advice. We'll see you there soon.
Yeah, come over. It's nice.